Before we get started, I just want to take a quick second to thank everybody that's been watching the videos, supporting the channel. It means a bunch to me. I really do appreciate you guys coming and checking out my stuff. If you haven't already and you're enjoying my content, please like and subscribe. It'll help me keep doing this going forward. So, without further ado, let's get rolling. All right, everybody, we're going to get right into this. We're going to go through each group of items, starting with the charging handles, working through the uppers, the gas tubes, stocks, pistol grips, barrels, gas blocks, muzzle devices, suppressors, handguards, and some bonus items here too. So hopefully by the time you walk out of this, you won't need to look at any more videos at all on how to put a gun together. You can go right into the flea market and build one with no help. So the first components we're going to go through here are the charging handles. The first two here provide no bonuses. They're the standard ones that come on the ADAR and the M4 by themselves with a standard gun. No bonuses. It just fills the spot of the required part. The next four all provide bonuses. Starting off with the Badger, you get the +1, as well as with the HK extended. The Raptor provides the highest bonus of +3, and you have two choices here. And the only difference is price. These are exactly the same, other than one's gray and one's black. But the black you can buy from mechanic, which means it's cheaper on the flea market. The gray costs substantially more, 3 to 4 times as much depending on when you're buying it. So keep that in mind. So the second set of components we're going to look at are the uppers. Now again, you have your standard ADAR and your M4 uppers. There is a slight difference between these, +4 and +5 on the ergonomics. The next one is kind of the middle of the road upper. It's your TX15, the lightweight upper. It's +6 ergonomics and -2 recoil. Now these last two, the MER1S and the Gen 3, are your first two where you got to pick a path, whether you're going for recoil or ergonomics on your M4. The MER1S provides a higher recoil reduction as well as an increase in accuracy, but only gives you +8 ergonomics. Whereas the Gen 3 is only 2% reduction in recoil, but it gives you 13 ergonomics. The third set of parts we're going to get into is the buffer tubes and stocks, because they kind of all mesh together. Your Colt A2 buffer tube is basically a circular non-keyed buffer tube. It's only necessary for these 3 PRS Gen 3 stocks. These are not identical though. Your black and your gray are, so there's just a color difference at 34% recoil and 16 ergonomics, but the tan actually provides a higher recoil number at 36 with a lower ergonomics. But these are not your best stocks when you're building an M4, so I wouldn't necessarily pick one of these if you're building from the ground up. Now your 4 keyed buffer tubes are a little bit easier to pick through. You have your ADAR standard that comes on the ADAR that provides no bonuses, followed by the Colt, which gives you a 1% reduction in recoil. And this is also on the stock M4. Your advanced tube gives you +1 ergonomics and -4% recoil. Now this is your standard advanced tube. For some reason, painting it red makes your bullet fly faster and be more accurate, because you have the same stats as the black buffer tube with the addition of +5% accuracy and +2 muzzle velocity. This thing is very expensive, however. This is it's usually always 100,000. Sometimes you can get it a little bit cheaper, sometimes it's a little more expensive. Whereas the black buffer tube is simply right here. If you have a mechanic and he's not out, you can get it for 10,000. Otherwise, you're a fifth or sixth the cost of the red one. Now, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these individual stocks. You can kind of pick based on looks, but I do have them ordered in highest ergonomics and lowest recoil reduction to lowest ergonomics and highest recoil reduction. So this is the order that they're in. So if you want to be somewhere in the middle, you're looking for the slim line, which is 36 and 4. You got 34 and 5. Or you got the HK1E, which is the highest recoil reduction and lowest ergonomics. Now below this is kind of its own little group of stocks. These two little guys here. The ADAR 215 wooden stock and the HACQR, the Hera arms. These are interesting because they do act as stocks, but they also take up the spot of the pistol grip. They have an enormous ergonomics buff and a pretty good recoil buff. And then lastly, we have the 4 stocks that are integrated buffer tubes, which means you don't need to use a buffer tube. In order to put any of these stocks on a rifle, you have to have a buffer tube, as you can see here. So then it'll go on. If you do not have that buffer tube on there, won't install. These all have the buffer tube integrated into them, so you don't require one. And again, these are ordered from highest ergonomics and lowest recoil to highest recoil and lowest ergonomics. So with no buffer tube, you can straight put that guy right on there like that. It's just one less part to worry about. Next up on our list of components is the pistol grips. Now these are about as straightforward as it gets. I have these ordered from lowest ergonomics in groups all the way up to highest ergonomics. So these are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 15, and then 18. This is your highest. The only difference between all of these besides ergonomics is their weights and their cost. So if cost isn't the object, here's your highest ergo pistol grip right there. So the next part is also a relatively straightforward part in itself, but can have a lot of implications on the rest of the parts that go on the gun. Your barrels are 260 millimeter, 370 millimeter, 406 millimeter, 18 inch, and 20 inch. And pretty simply, as you go up in length, your stats change the same. So as you can see, going from the 260 millimeter barrel to the 370 millimeter barrel, you go from -2% to -4%. Your ergo goes from -6 to -9, and your muzzle velocity goes from -16.31 to -6.48. And that trend continues as you go up through each size of the barrel. You go from -4 to -5, and so on and so forth, all the way up to the longest barrel, which is -6%, but has the highest hit on ergonomics. Now, when you're doing your builds, it's almost best to pick the barrel after you pick the rest of the parts. This is be your last part to pick because of how finicky it is to get these to fit with specific handguards, gas blocks, and other things. Now, one thing I want to show you guys is how some of these gas blocks work and some of them don't. So I'm going to take this QD rail off of here and put different gas blocks on. So obviously you put the M4 one on, this rail will not fit on there because this is in the way. Neither will that one. However, this one does. And the reason is because it has this gap on top right here that you can see. So that's just something you have to watch out for. Now, if you don't care about anything on the front and you always go with the low profile, all of these stocks are always going to fit on there. Even the ones like this that are meant for the other one, you can always keep those. It just allows you a greater flexibility if you always go with a low profile. And that works for the expensive one and the cheap one. So if you're not hunting ergonomics and you're trying to save money, this one here, you can get it for $5,000 for mechanic. So our next item up is the beginning of the complicated stuff. And bear with me here, this kind of looks like a jumbled mess, but we'll walk through it and I'll explain it piece by piece. So your two rows of compensators here and here are sequenced from lowest recoil reduction to highest recoil reduction. So 5, 6, these are your 5s, these are your 6s, 7s, you got 8, then 10, and all the way up to -11% recoil. Now inside of here, you have different stats with ergonomics and muzzle velocities and different things like that. And that's for each of their own to pick on where they want to go. There is a large number of choices. On top of that, there are these very specific compensators or muzzle brakes that are direct thread attachments for suppressors. Now, the interesting thing about this is these stats stack. So for example, if you put both of these on your gun, you get the -5% and the -4% recoil. So you end up with a total of -9. So each of these stats end up stacking on each other for all of these. So with this Wave QD, muzzle brake, and suppressor, you can actually have -14% recoil. You've also got your direct thread suppressor, your rotor. So this is kind of your budget option for suppressors. It's not very good, but it works. And then you have your two suppressors that require mounts. These are not very good. I wouldn't ever recommend running them specifically for the M4. You can if you want, if you find them in raid or whatever, but these are not your best options when it comes to suppressors. So for your highest recoil reduction, if you're going to be running a suppressor, is your Wave QD here. Your highest ergo option is actually going to be with the Monster Mini. So you're using the Surefire and the Monster Mini. It only has a -2 ergonomics hit. That's the lowest of all the suppressors out there. And lastly, you have this very interesting piece. It isn't a compensator in the idea that it directly threads to the barrel, but it does actually provide recoil reduction. And what it does is it attaches to your SAQD rails, your long and your short one. It directly attaches to those. And the beauty of it is you can still attach this to the barrel after So you end up with this -7% recoil on the jailbreak, as well as the -11 from this flash hider. Now the downside to this is cost. This thing is very, very expensive. 20 to 25,000 to get one of these jailbreaks. Now when it comes to putting these things together, there's quite a few intricacies and little bits and pieces that help. Now to help out here, I'm going to show you a group of handguards that can go on every setup regardless of barrel length. So all 6 of these here, these can all go on every barrel regardless of the length. Some of them look kind of weird because the barrel is recessed way behind it, but it still works. So these 6, you've got the RSASS, the URX3 6-inch or UXR3 8-inch, the RIS2 FSP 9.5, the MK10, the LVOA, the RS2 9.5, and the Stinger Viper. Of these guys, your best bet is either the LVOA-S or the MK10, in my humble opinion. Now, for your short barrel, aside from these, your only other option for stocks is this SAQD rail, which allows you, as we've talked about before, to put the jailbreak on. And that is probably one of the more, that is your more expensive option. Up to the long barrel, besides these 6, you can put all 5 of these on. Now, one thing to note, when you put, like, for example, the Ion Light, pretty good. +11 ergonomics, +1 accuracy, -1 recoil. This is if you're building like a DMR or a long barrel ADAR or whatever you want to look at here. You can't put one of these guys on here. They don't fit. For example, if you want to use front sight posts, the +1 ergonomic Magpul front sight posts on these things, on some of these that don't have rails, what you end up needing to do is when you put this on, you have to put one of these blocks that has a Picatinny rail, and then you can put your front sight post on there. With the stocks, any of these that have the M-lock system to them, you'll see in the description M-lock, or basically they have slots on the bottom instead of a Picatinny rail. You have to use either one of these Magpul M-lock grips to go directly onto it, in which that case it will bolt directly to it, or you need to bring an M-lock Picatinny rail into the mix, which goes on, and then you can apply any object that'll fit that Picatinny rail to it. Now these are work in, generally the longer ones go on the bottom, shorter ones go on the sides, but that's not always the case. So for example, you see here, these go on the left and right, but not on the bottom. But the bottom one, the 4-inch, will go on the bottom, but not on the left and right sides. And that's for the M-locks. For your MK10, it has its own specific rail systems for it. These MK10 10-inch and 3-inch that go on the side that allow you to put rails on. And then these URX sights have their own attachments as well, instead of using a standard one. So you have your 3-inch that will allow you to go on the bottom, and then you have your side mounts already there. Now, so the URX is another one that has its own special setups. Now you can put your grip on the bottom, or you can put your Picatinny rail on the bottom, just like I did right there. You also have these handguards, these little panels that can bolt on left and right and bottom, and then they even have a bottom with a little grip. And these add ergo. It's free ergo, essentially. So you can add 4 ergo to this thing on the left and right with these little pieces. And as you can see, they have different sizes that go on either side. Now these come in tan and black, so personal choice. You can Barbie doll it up however you like. And that works on all of the URX ones. So you have this, and the 2 URX handguards have these stoppers. The next thing we're going to go over is an in-depth explanation of how all of the barrels and handguards interact with each other. So we'll start with the smallest 260 millimeter barrel first. This barrel fits the SAI 10-inch QD rail, the Knights Armament RIS, the M4 standard, the Magpul MOE SL carbine length, the Strike Viper, the Remington RSAS, the URX 3 8-inch, the Daniel Defense RIS 2 9.5-inch with the gas block opening, the MK10, the War Sport LVOA-S, the Daniel Defense RIS-295 without the gas block opening, and finally, the Stinger Viper 10-inch. Now I'll leave these up here for a few seconds so you guys can review them, and then we'll roll right on to the next barrel. Next is the 370mm barrel, the most versatile of all the barrels in the aspect that it fits more handguards than any of the others. It fits the same handguards as the 260mm barrel, with the exception of the SI 10-inch QD rail. In addition, it also fits the Daniel Defense RIS-2 12.25-inch, the War Sport LVOA-C, the URX 3.1 10.75-inch, and lastly, the SAI 14.5 QD rail. Again, the 370mm barrel will give you the most choice when it comes to handguard selection. Now on to the 406mm barrel. This barrel takes away 4 of the handguards available with the 370mm, but adds the ability to fit the Magpul MOE SL mid-length foregrip and the ADAR 215 wood stock. The 18-inch barrel is essentially the same as the 406mm barrel, but it swaps to be able to fit the ADAR and the Magpul mid-length foregrip for the Lone Star Ion Light handguard. The final barrel is the 20-inch, the longest of the M4 barrels. It is identical to the 18-inch barrel in which handguards are compatible. The only difference between the two is the stats that the 20-inch barrel brings with it and the restriction on some of the components that you can add to the 18-inch that you can't add to the 20, and vice versa. So the last thing I want to do with you guys here is go through a full build. Now, this is a recoil reduction build, if you will. It's not the perfect build, it's not the best build, but it's one that shows you a lot of the different parts. So the first thing we start off with here is the actual M4 itself, the lower. We'll put the upper on, pistol grip, then the charging handle, buffer tube, stock, barrel, gas tube, muzzle brake, foregrip, the jailbreak extra for this SAI, our 2 Picatinny rails, one for the grip, one for the laser, and then these Magpul front and rear sights. Now what these things do is you can use them for sights, but they actually add +1 ergonomics, so you can get a little extra ergonomics out of throwing those things on. And the last thing we'll put on is the sight. Now if you want to run suppressed instead of this, you have to take the jailbreak off, roll with that. And for the sake, I did it like this, but if I was going to go with a suppressed gun, I would actually change to the longer barrel and a different handguard than running this one. And there you have it. Well, and that concludes the video, everybody. I don't want to drag this out any longer. You could honestly spend an hour talking about the M4 and all the parts to it. I hope you guys found this useful. I hope it helps you get M4s built. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments below. I have lots of other ideas for videos, but what you guys want to see is what's really going to drive what I make. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.